11 abandoned celebrity mansions nobody dares to buy, even for $1. Sometimes, a mansion does not need ghosts to feel cursed. Empty rooms, cracked gates, overgrown pools, a famous name on the deed. And suddenly, a dream home becomes a warning that even wealth can rot behind locked doors. From the outside, these estates looked untouchable. Movie stars, music icons, and legends once filled them with parties, power, and luxury. But behind the marble floors, financial trouble, scandal, tragedy, and bad memories quietly turned paradise into property nobody wanted. Today on Black Hollywood Uncut, we're pulling back the curtain on 11 abandoned celebrity mansions nobody dares to buy, even for $1. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay until the final story. Because the last homes carry twists darker than their broken walls. Michael Jackson died age 50 in 2009. Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch was never just a house. It was a kingdom built from fantasy, loneliness, innocence, and impossible fame. Hidden across thousands of acres in California, Neverland became one of the most recognizable celebrity estates in the world, complete with amusement rides, a private zoo, a movie theater, and the kind of dreamlike details only the biggest star on earth could imagine. For Michael, it was meant to be an escape from a world that had watched him since childhood. But over time, the magic surrounding Neverland began to darken. As Jackson's life became surrounded by lawsuits, media storms, financial pressure, and public scrutiny, the ranch stopped looking like a fairy tale and started feeling like a symbol of everything fame had cost him. The place that was once built to protect wonder became impossible to separate from controversy. Buyers were no longer just looking at land, buildings, and luxury features. They were looking at history, complicated, emotional, and heavy. After Michael Jackson died in 2009 at the age of 50, Neverland became even more frozen in memory. The amusement rides were removed. The property was renamed Sycamore Valley Ranch. Efforts were made to strip away the spectacle and make it easier to sell, but the shadow of its past remained. The asking price dropped dramatically over the years. Yet the estate still struggled to find the right buyer. No amount of landscaping or renovation could erase the fact that this was once the private world of the most famous entertainer on the planet. Eventually, the ranch was purchased by billionaire Ron Burkle, but its original spirit had already changed forever. What remained was not the Neverland millions of fans remembered from old headlines and television specials. It was quieter, emptier, and far more complicated. That is what makes Michael Jackson's mansion story so haunting. Neverland was designed as a place where childhood wonder could live forever. Instead, it became a monument to the loneliness of superstardom. A reminder that even the most magical homes can become impossible to sell when the memories inside them are too powerful to ignore. Bruce Lee died age 32 in 1973. Bruce Lee's former Hong Kong home carries a kind of sadness that feels completely different from the giant celebrity mansions built to impress the world. It was not the largest estate in this countdown, and it was never meant to compete with the palaces of rock stars, rappers, or Hollywood billionaires. But what it held was something far more powerful. The final shadow of a man who changed global culture before his life ended, at only 32 years old in 1973. Located in Kowloon, the house became tied to the last chapter of Bruce Lee's life. To fans, it was not just a residence, it was sacred ground. This was the place connected to the martial artist, actor, philosopher, and cultural icon who helped bring Asian martial arts into worldwide popular imagination. Bruce Lee did not simply perform fight scenes. He transformed the way action cinema moved, breathed, and looked on screen. But after his death, the home did not become the protected museum many fans hoped for. Instead, it drifted into years of uncertainty, changing ownership, legal complications, failed preservation efforts, and slow decay. While millions around the world continued to celebrate Lee's discipline, speed, charisma, and philosophy, the physical space connected to his memory was left vulnerable to neglect. That contrast is what makes the story feel so painful. A house connected to a legend should have become a living tribute. It could have held photographs, training memories, family history, and the quiet atmosphere of a man who built an empire through focus and willpower. Instead, it became a reminder that even the homes of icons can be forgotten when money, politics, and preservation fail to align. What makes Bruce Lee's abandoned home so haunting is not luxury lost. It is legacy left unprotected. His body of work remains alive, inspiring fighters, filmmakers, athletes, and dreamers across generations. But the place that could have preserved one of his most personal chapters slipped into uncertainty. And in that silence, the house tells a heartbreaking truth. Sometimes the world protects the legend, but fails to protect the place where the legend once lived. Britney Spears' 44 age. Now, Britney Spears' mansion story is not just about real estate. It is about what happens when a home once built for escape becomes tied to years of public pressure, personal struggle, and the exhausting weight of superstardom. Her Thousand Oaks estate was designed to feel like a sanctuary, private, elegant, and distant from the chaos that followed her name everywhere. Behind its gates were manicured grounds, a resort-style pool, Italian-inspired architecture, and the kind of luxury that suggested peace was finally possible. But for Britney, privacy was never simple. From the time she was a teenager, the world watched her with a level of obsession that few entertainers have ever survived. Every outfit, relationship, breakdown, comeback, and legal battle became public material. So even a beautiful home could not exist as just a home. It became another symbol in a much larger story about control, isolation, fame, and the cost of being treated like a spectacle instead of a human being. In the transcript, her property is presented as a once glamorous villa that lost some of its shine as her personal challenges deepened. That image is powerful, but it should be handled carefully. The real emotional truth is not that a mansion simply fell apart. It is that the meaning around the property changed. Buyers do not only look at marble floors, gardens, and square footage. They also feel the history attached to a place. And when a celebrity home carries memories of hardship, headlines, and public pain, luxury can suddenly feel heavy. Britney's story also reveals a harsh truth about celebrity real estate. Fame can make a property valuable, but it can also make it difficult to separate from the star's most vulnerable moments. A mansion that once represented success may later feel like a reminder of everything that success demanded. Yet Britney Spears is not a tragedy frozen in place. She remains one of the most influential pop stars of her generation, a woman whose music shaped an era and whose survival became part of her legacy. Her mansion story matters because it shows that even behind gates, pools, and perfect landscaping, fame can still follow you home. Johnny Depp's 63 age. Now Johnny Depp's abandoned village estate in France feels less like a celebrity mansion and more like a forgotten movie set left behind after the cameras stopped rolling. Tucked near Saint-Tropez, the property was not simply a house with gates and marble floors. It was an entire private hamlet. Stone cottages, winding paths, a small church, a restaurant space, and a quiet village square that reflected Depp's unusual imagination. For an actor known for eccentric characters and strange worlds, this estate felt almost too perfect. At the height of his fame, Depp turned the retreat into a personal sanctuary. It was far from Hollywood noise, far from red carpets, and far from the machinery that had made him one of the most recognizable actors on earth. The village carried a handcrafted charm, the kind of place where fantasy and privacy seemed to blend together. But what once looked like artistic freedom later became a heavy financial and emotional burden. As Depp's public life became tangled in lawsuits, financial disputes, career turbulence, and constant media attention, the estate's fairy tale image began to shift. Selling it was not easy. The property was massive, unusual, expensive to maintain, and difficult to fit into the normal luxury market. A billionaire might want a mansion, A collector might want history, but an entire restored village requires a buyer with money, patience, vision, and a willingness to inherit someone else's dream. That is what makes Depp's French estate so fascinating. It was beautiful, but too personal. Magical, but too demanding. Famous, but not easy to own. The same creative personality that made the property unforgettable may have also made it harder to sell. Buyers were not just purchasing land and buildings. They were stepping into the private world of Johnny Depp, with all its charm, chaos, and cinematic shadows. In the end, the estate became a symbol of a strange truth about celebrity luxury. Sometimes the most extraordinary homes are the hardest to move on from. Depp built a village that looked like escape. But when the dream no longer fit the life around it, even paradise became something waiting for a buyer, brave enough to believe in it again. Cher 80 now Cher's Malibu mansion was never just another celebrity home. It was a statement, dramatic, elegant, and unmistakably built for a woman who had spent decades refusing to disappear. Perched above the Pacific Ocean, the Renaissance-inspired estate carried the atmosphere of an Italian villa dropped into the California coastline. Stone arches, sweeping views, lush gardens, and grand interiors made it feel less like a beach house and more like a palace created for an icon. For Cher, that kind of home made sense. Her career has always been larger than one era, one genre, or one image. She survived reinvention after reinvention, moving from pop star to television personality, actress, fashion symbol, and cultural legend. So her mansion reflected that same scale. It was glamorous, theatrical, and deeply personal, a home that seemed to carry the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime turning attention into power. But luxury does not always guarantee a buyer. In the transcript, Cher's estate is presented as a breathtaking property that struggled on the market despite its beauty and celebrity connection. That is the cruel twist of high-end real estate. A mansion can have ocean views, history, and a famous name attached to it, yet still become difficult to sell if the style feels too specific, the price feels too high, or the market changes around it. Cher's mansion was not undesirable because it lacked beauty. It may have been difficult because it was too much of itself. The same dramatic personality that made it unforgettable could make buyers hesitate. Some people want a blank canvas. Cher's estate was not blank. It had identity. It had presence. It had a voice. That is why this story fits so perfectly into the world of celebrity mansions nobody rushes to buy. The house was not abandoned in the tragic sense. It was trapped in a different kind of limbo, too glamorous to ignore, too personalized to easily replace, and too tied to an icon to feel ordinary. Cher remains one of the most enduring entertainers in American culture, but her Malibu mansion proves that even timeless star power cannot force the market to move. Sometimes a home can be breathtaking, legendary, and still wait in silence for the right person to understand it. Mike Tyson's 60 now Mike Tyson's former Ohio mansion was not just a home. It was a monument to a young champion who seemed unstoppable. During the height of his boxing reign, Tyson lived with a kind of excess that matched his terrifying reputation in the ring. The estate was massive, flashy, and almost unreal, filled with features that felt more like a private resort than a residence. An indoor basketball court, multiple pools, a private nightclub, and enough space to make the outside world feel distant. But Tyson's story was never only about power. Behind the fame, money, and championship belts was a life marked by chaos, legal trouble, financial pressure, and emotional turbulence. As his career began to unravel, the mansion became a symbol of how quickly greatness can turn into burden. The same property that once showed the world his success eventually became too expensive, too heavy, and too tied to a chapter he could no longer control. After Tyson walked away from the estate, the mansion sat abandoned for years. Its once polished rooms fell into decay. Dust replaced luxury. Empty hallways replaced celebration. Urban explorers captured the eerie remains of a home that once belonged to one of the most feared athletes alive. What made the images so haunting was not just the damage. It was the contrast. A palace built for a champion had become a shell, frozen in the aftermath of fame, money, and downfall. But unlike many abandoned celebrity mansions, Tyson's former home did not stay trapped in ruin forever. In a surprising twist, the property was eventually purchased by a church and transformed into a place of worship. That change gave the mansion a new meaning. Where excess once ruled, community took root. Where Tyson's turbulent past once echoed, faith and restoration began to fill the space. That is what makes Mike Tyson's mansion story so powerful. It is not simply about a celebrity losing a lavish home. It is about transformation. The estate went from wealth to decay, from decay to redemption, and in many ways, it mirrors Tyson himself. A man whose life has moved through violence, regret, survival, and unexpected rebirth. Lil Wayne, 43. Age now. Lil Wayne's Miami Beach mansion told the story of a rap superstar at the height of his power. Set in an exclusive waterfront enclave, the home had everything expected from an artist who helped define an era of hip-hop. Sleek interiors, a private theater, a modern gym, a resort-style pool, and views that turned everyday life into a luxury video. It was not just a place to live. It was a trophy, a statement, and proof that Wayne had climbed from New Orleans prodigy to global rap icon. But celebrity real estate has a strange way of exposing the limits of fame. A famous name can make a property interesting, but it cannot guarantee the right buyer at the right price. When Lil Wayne decided to sell the mansion, the process became far more difficult than expected. The home carried prestige, location, and expensive features, yet it still lingered on the market. The price had to be reduced more than once, and what should have been an easy luxury sale became a long, frustrating reminder that even superstar status has no control over market timing. That is the hidden tension behind Wayne's mansion story. On the outside, everything looked perfect. Waterfront property, celebrity ownership, high-end design. But for buyers, luxury is not only about fame. It is about value, maintenance, taste, timing, and whether a home feels like their own future instead of someone else's past. Wayne's mansion was impressive, but impressive does not always mean easy to sell. For Lil Wayne, the house reflected one chapter of success, not the whole story. His real legacy was never built inside a mansion. It was built in mixtapes, verses, wordplay, influence, and a generation of rappers who followed his blueprint. The property may have sold for less than hoped, but Wayne's place in music history was never dependent on a real estate deal. Still, the mansion remains a sharp lesson. Even when a celebrity has money, fame, and a name recognized around the world, a dream home can become a financial weight. Lil Wayne's Miami estate proved that in the luxury market, glamour attracts attention, but it does not always close the sale. Pablo Escobar, die, age 44, in 1993. Pablo Escobar's abandoned estate does not fit the usual image of a celebrity mansion. It was not the home of a movie star, a pop icon, or a beloved entertainer. It was the fortress of a criminal empire, a place built from power, fear, violence, and unimaginable wealth. And that is exactly what makes its ruins so disturbing. Unlike other mansions in this countdown, Escobar's property is not haunted by lost glamour. It is haunted by what that glamour was built upon. At the height of his power, Escobar lived with the kind of excess most people could barely imagine. His estate was a symbol of control, surrounded by luxury, private spaces, and the terrifying mythology of a man who became one of the most infamous drug lords in history. To the outside world, it looked like wealth without limits. But underneath that, wealth was bloodshed, corruption, and a legacy that would leave scars far beyond the walls of any mansion. After Escobar died in 1993 at the age of 44, his properties became frozen reminders of a violent era. Nature slowly reclaimed parts of his estate. Buildings crumbled, walls cracked, rusting structures and empty spaces replaced the activity that once filled the grounds. What had once represented dominance became a ghostly monument to collapse. In the transcript, Escobar's estate is presented as one of the most chilling abandoned properties, connected to a famous name. And while he was not a celebrity in the traditional entertainment sense, his notoriety made the property impossible to ignore. Buyers do not look at a place like that and see only land. They see danger, memory, and a past too dark to simply renovate away. That is the real reason Escobar's former estate feels different from the rest. Other celebrity mansions may be burdened by debt, divorce, market failure, or personal tragedy. Escobar's estate carries something heavier, the shadow of a criminal empire that destroyed countless lives. Today, the ruins stand as a warning. Wealth can build palaces, but it cannot cleanse the story behind them. And when a mansion is tied to fear instead of fame, even time struggles to make it feel safe again. Burt Reynolds died, age 82, in 2018. Burt Reynolds' Florida ranch once felt like the perfect reflection of the man himself. Big, bold, charismatic, and impossible to ignore. At the height of his fame, Reynolds was one of Hollywood's most bankable leading men, a star whose smile, swagger, and masculine charm made him a household name. His home was not just a private escape. It was a monument to the kind of success only a few actors ever touch. The property carried everything people associated with old Hollywood confidence. Wide-open land, horse stables, guest houses, luxury details, and the feeling of a star who wanted room to breathe away from the lights. Friends, celebrities, and industry insiders once moved through that world, making the ranch feel less like a simple residence and more like a personal kingdom. For Reynolds, it was a sanctuary from the pressure of fame, a place where the legend could live beyond the screen. But celebrity wealth can fade faster than the public realizes. As Reynolds faced financial setbacks, lawsuits, divorce costs, and mounting debts, the estate that once symbolized freedom became a burden. The ranch went from dream property to financial weight, and eventually, he was forced to part with it. What made the story even more painful was that the mansion did not command the kind of value its history suggested. It struggled, lingered, and finally sold for far less than the image of Burt Reynolds might have once promised. That contrast is what gives his mansion story its emotional pull. This was not just a house losing market value. It was the physical evidence of a Hollywood life-changing seasons. The same property that once announced power and success became a reminder that even legends are not protected from money problems, aging fame, and the cold math of real estate. Burt Reynolds died in 2018 at the age of 82, leaving behind a career filled with iconic performances and complicated personal chapters. His former ranch remains part of that legacy, not because it was abandoned forever, but because it shows how fragile even the grandest celebrity dream can become when the spotlight begins to move on. Liza Minnelli, 80 age now. Liza Minnelli's mansion story carries the faded glow of old Hollywood, the kind of glamour that feels beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The Beverly Hills home connected to her family was not just another expensive property. It was tied to a dynasty of performance, music, film, and show business royalty. As the daughter of Judy Garland and director Vincente Minnelli, Liza grew up surrounded by a level of fame that most people only see from a distance. In the transcript, the home is described as Liza Minnelli's childhood residence, a place once filled with life, history, and the elegance of a vanished entertainment era. Its rooms were connected to a family legacy that shaped American popular culture. But over time, that glamour began to fade. After family changes, ownership complications, and years without proper care, the property slipped into neglect. The same halls that once suggested Hollywood privilege became cracked, silent, and worn down by time. What makes this story so haunting is not just the physical decay. It is the contrast between memory and reality. A house can hold laughter, music, parties, ambition, and childhood dreams. But if no one protects it, even a home connected to legends can become another abandoned shell. Urban explorers and online videos later turned the property's decline into a spectacle. But underneath the broken windows and damaged walls was something more emotional: the slow disappearance of a family's private history. For Liza Minnelli, her own legacy was never dependent on that house. She became a star in her own right, an Oscar-winning performer, a commanding stage presence, and one of the most distinctive entertainers of her generation. Her voice, movement, and dramatic intensity gave her a place far beyond the shadow of her famous parents. Still, the mansion remains a symbol of how fragile Hollywood history can be. Fame may preserve songs, films, and photographs, but it does not always preserve the places where those lives unfolded. Liza Minnelli's family home stands as a bittersweet reminder that even the brightest names in entertainment can leave behind rooms that time refuses to protect. David Gilmour, 80 age. Now, David Gilmour's Hook End Manor was not just a celebrity property. It was a place where music history breathed through the walls, connected to one of rock's most influential guitarists and voices. The English countryside estate carried a legacy far beyond luxury. For fans of Pink Floyd, Gilmour's name represents atmosphere, emotion, and soundscapes that turned songs into entire worlds. A mansion tied to that kind of artist was never going to feel ordinary. In the transcript, Hook End Manor is described as a once important creative sanctuary, a place where music was recorded, shaped, and remembered. Unlike many celebrity mansions built mainly for display, this estate had artistic purpose. Its studio spaces were part of the story. Music passed through those rooms. Ideas were tested there. The building held echoes of ambition, experimentation, and the private labor behind songs that later reached millions of listeners. But even places touched by greatness can fall into silence. After changing hands over the years, Hook End Manor reportedly slipped into neglect, with parts of the property losing the life that once made it special. The image is striking. A mansion once connected to legendary sound, now marked by quiet corridors, aging walls, and a sense of creative energy left behind. For a property with musical history, abandonment feels especially cruel. A recording space is meant to capture voices. When it is empty, the silence becomes louder. What makes Gilmour's mansion story powerful is that it is not only about wealth fading, it is about cultural memory being left vulnerable. A normal luxury home can be replaced by another luxury home, but a place where artists created, rehearsed, and recorded carries something that money alone cannot rebuild. Once that atmosphere disappears, restoration becomes more than construction. It becomes an attempt to revive a feeling. David Gilmour's legacy remains secure. His guitar work, songwriting, and influence on rock music continue to inspire listeners around the world. But Hook End Manor stands as a reminder that the spaces behind legendary art can be just as fragile as the people who made it. Even a house filled with music history can become a forgotten room if no one chooses to keep the sound alive. In the end, these mansions were never just walls, gates, and marble floors. They were monuments to pressure, excess, heartbreak, and the lonely side of fame. Behind every locked door was a story the public rarely saw, where money could not protect these icons from loss, scandal, debt, or silence. But even when the homes faded, the legends did not. Their music, films, fights, and unforgettable performances still live far beyond those empty rooms. The mansions may have cracked under time and tragedy, but the impact these stars left on entertainment, culture, and history remains impossible to erase. So which abandoned mansion shocked you the most? And which celebrity home do you think carries the darkest story? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut, and hit the notification bell for more unvarnished stories fame tried to leave behind.